You're listening to the Soils for Life podcast. I'm Ellie Court. Today on the podcast, a conversation with Dr. Mary Cole, soil microbiologist, educator, and one of Australia's pioneers of biological farming. But first, a quick request. If you've been tuning in regularly and getting something out of these conversations, please consider rating the podcast and leaving a very short review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening. Even just a few words. It's quick and easy, and it's one of the best ways to help us connect with more people. Okay, back to the podcast. With over 40 years of experience, Dr. Mary Cole has worked with farmers across the country to restore soil and landscape health. Working with the invisible engine room of agriculture, the microbiome beneath our feet, Mary is a passionate advocate for biological farming. On her own farm in Gippsland Victoria, she's seen a doubling in soil carbon after decades using compost products, aeration of the soil, and no synthetic inputs. In this episode, Mary describes the underground communities of microbes that can work for the benefit of farmers, particularly the superstar of the soil, mycorrhizal fungi, and how the underground networks it creates are central to water holding, nutrient cycling, climate resilience, and food quality. Mary shares simple principles and practices for rebuilding microbial life in the soil, and shares some of the barriers she's faced in getting science and practice to meet. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Dr. Mary Cole.
Then they would go away with a box of vegetables. So as children, we'll basically go grow something, go grow a radish, go grow a carrot. And my dad only ever used manure because in those days the milk cart would come along the road and it was always a big fight as to where the milk cart horse dropped its droppings. That's in front of my place, therefore that's mine. And it went into making compost and things like that. So I think this is what I say. It's not a project for me. It's been my life. And I think with that association with the First Nation people is that we are privileged to live here and we have to care for it. And so my whole career has been caring for country, although I'm an immigrant in effect. But yeah, it started way back, and it's just my passion for life.
Yeah, I have quite a similar childhood memory of walking with my mum I think it was in a national park or somewhere, a natural place, and she picked up a handful of soil from the side of the earth and held it up to my nose and said, "Smell this. This is just goodness."
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't think I actually, I didn't then decide that I was going to be dedicating my professional life to the soil. It took me a long time to get here, but it is interesting how those formative memories do have an influence on us.
That's right, and I think it's maybe not even just the soil. I think it's the whole concept that the soil is where everything on earth comes from. Therefore, the natural progression for me through my career was through science. My PhD was pathogen of lucerne, as it happened, which is an amazing plant. But it progressed to that basic knowledge that I had as a child, that everything that we do above the ground is all predicated on caring for what's below the ground. But that's forgotten.
That's not knowledge that most people have, or at least not knowledge that most people have front and centre.
Yeah.
In their minds.
Yeah. Well, I have farmers come to me and they say, "Oh, got a problem with my macadamia trees. Oh, got a problem with my roses." I said, "No, you don't. You've got a problem with your soil. Let's fix the soil and you won't have your black spot on your roses, etc."
So we're going to be talking a lot about soil and soil microbiology, but maybe just as a primer, who are the stars of the show when it comes to soil microbiology and the life in the soil? Who's there and what are their beneficial functions?
Well, you have your bacteria, your fungi, your protozoa, your nematodes, your little arthropods, your earthworms. But to me, for the future of life on Earth, it's the mycorrhizal fungal biomass. Because the mycorrhizae have been around probably for as long as trees have been terrestrial. So Mother Nature put them there for a reason. And they're really, really important in soil health. And they'd be destroyed by conventional cultivation. So I would put mycorrhizal fungi front and centre, the new biofertilizer of the world for the future, and then the bacteria and the fungi. Protozoa are important because it's the protozoa that eat the bacteria and fungi to give us our plant available nutrients. And so this is where all the mineralization. But I'd say my star is the mycorrhizal fungal biomass and how it influences everything that happens above the soil.
It's the superstar, the Taylor Swift of the soil.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit more about mycorrhizal fungi and how it performs that role.
We have basically two groups of fungi. We have the saprophytic fungi, which live on dead and dying. They're the recyclers. Then we have this other group of fungi. Many of them are either the most primitive division, the zygomycetes, the very most primitive division in the kingdoms of the fungi, or the big mushrooms, right? The big visible ones right at the top. And Mother Nature has evolved such that they have a symbiotic relationship with plant roots. And what they do is by attaching to the plant roots, they increase the spatial area that the plant, or whatever is attached to those roots, is able to harvest the nutrients from the soil, particularly phosphorus. And so you have this biomass that's attached to the plant roots as long as it's not disturbed by cultivation. And that mycorrhizal fungi exudes a particular glycoprotein called glomalin. And that was found by Sarah, lost her last name, in America in her PhD, purely serendipitously. It was a nuisance in her PhD results. She then was able to find out what it was, and now there's a lot of research. That glomalin is now known to hold more carbon than even humus. But it's the first thing that's destroyed when you cultivate and you remove plant roots. That glomalin then is able to hold the nutrients. It has a water holding capacity. It also exudes another element called calcium oxalate, which shifts the pH. So I'm very much against liming. I would rather have the mycorrhizal biomass and allow the plants to find their own pH. And so that mycorrhizal fungi extends the root system, holds water. And the reason why it's so important in the future is that if we go into the increasing temperature from climate change, but also the more intermittent type rain events, we need to hold water. But the other thing that research is finding now with mycorrhizae is that higher CO2 in the environment actually stimulates the growth of mycorrhizae. So if the mycorrhizae is able to take carbon dioxide from the environment, grow bigger and better, therefore it's going to be holding more moisture. Therefore, into the future, when we have more difficult conditions, here we have an organism which is going to give us the ability to grow into conditions where not as much rain regularly, because it's all being held. And then also the fact that the carbon dioxide in the environment is actually helping it to grow. So as far as I'm concerned, the saviour of the planet into the future.
And at the same time out there scavenging for nutrients and bringing them to the plants and helping us grow what we need to...
That's right, because they're there, that nutrient body, that conversation that goes on between the plant exudates and the microbes that are in the soil. It's a constant, World Wide Web. Well, it's there way before World Wide Web came along. That functionality is there as long as we don't disturb it. So every time we disturb it, we're destroying what is actually keeping us alive on this planet.
I suspect we're going to talk a bit more about mycorrhizal fungi as we go through this conversation, but I want to bring it back to where we are right now on your farm in Gippsland. What do you know about the soil here and the soil microbiology on your place?
Well, we've been here 50 years plus. We've not used synthetic chemistry on it. We use a yeoman's plough, and I had the very great privilege to meet Alan Yeoman and Christine. So we aerate the soil. We use fish, kelp, molasses. We use rock dust. We don't overgraze. When we had cattle, we rotational graze. We shifted the herd numbers based on what we had available. We didn't use hay. We didn't need to use hay. About 25 years ago, I did a total chemistry test, or I had a total chemistry test done, and the total carbon was between 12 and 14%. I had it done again last year, and it's now 23%. Now, we've done nothing except feed the biology. We haven't worried about feeding what's above the ground. We have farmed our biology this whole 5 decades, and that's the response. Now, with our vegetable garden, with our fruit trees, again, we use compost tea, but the compost all comes from material that's on our farm, the shelter belts, etc. What we've found is by using the compost and the compost tea both as a soil spray and as a foliar spray, we don't have pests and diseases in our vegetables. You would have seen when you walked out to the vegetables. There's no pests and no diseases because the nutrient density of what we're growing, whether it's grass or apples or silver beet, whatever, has increased to such an extent that the bugs and the diseases don't attack. And there's plenty of literature showing that when you lift the bricks, when you lift the sugar, carbohydrates, etc., in a plant, then the bugs don't have the ability, the gut ability to be able to metabolize them. So we've done nothing except look after the soil, but we've been so rewarded with everything that's above the soil. Our stock, our steers always topped the market when they went to market. And I think what we've shown on this farm is that what I've talked about in all my lectures and all my talks around the world, we've actually demonstrated here. And you can come here and you can see it. And the mycorrhizal fungi on some of our plant roots are up to 60, 68, 58, 48, 65, whereas I get soils coming in here on a regular basis into the laboratory, and we have 0, 1, 2. The mycorrhizae have been destroyed.
And have you also been looking at the soil microbiological communities on the farm? Is that something that you've been looking at? And is there anything in particular that you've noticed in terms of how that's changed? You just mentioned the mycorrhizal fungi, but anything else?
I suppose the biggest, most obvious one is the earthworms.
Yeah.
You take a spade and you put your spade depth down and you take a square out and do a visual soil assessment. And we started off at, we started off with good numbers, 12, 20 odd worms. But I've taken soil samples now in spring and we've found 50 worms just in a spadeful. And yet in cultivated soils, or soils that have a lot of input of NPK, if they're pastures, you rarely find a worm.
And that's not an expensive exercise to go and stick a spade in the soil.
Not at all. And then with the other microbes, well, then they go up and down with the seasons. But we do have a lot of protozoa, which means we have a lot of the protozoa populations eat the bacteria and they produce the plant available nitrogen potential that's there. So we've got a lot of protozoa. So we know, and we know from our clovers, you go and get your nodules from your clovers, if they're white, okay, the nodules are there, but they're not picking up nitrogen. Ours are bright red at particular times of the year. So we know that the microbiology is doing what nature has wanted them to do.
You also provide education, training, soil and plant testing, consulting services to farmers through your company, AgPath. I'm interested in what type of farmers tend to approach you for support and what are some of the common questions or needs they have, as well as their motivations for coming to you. What's different about those farmers? What are the things that trigger them?
Probably they don't listen to agronomists. There's no university really, well, almost anywhere, but certainly in Australia, that really has a good agricultural, either undergraduate or postgraduate degree where they focus on soil health. We tried to do it up in a university in New South Wales, but it was less than successful. And so we have agronomists coming out that are really skilled young people, but they're totally ignorant of soil and the role that soil microbiology has in plant health. And so they're all about putting out your NPK and your lime or your urea or whatever it happens to be. And also then there's the chemical companies. We have distributors of chemicals who will come onto a farm just near me where we had an agronomist who was very, very skilled. He was an ex-PhD student of mine, a very skilled agronomist helping a farmer, leafy greens, small vegetables, transition to organics. The two big chemical companies, distributors, came and said, we will give you an agronomist for free if you go back to chemicals. And they did. We're selling knowledge, we're not selling product. I have farmers coming in, they'll say, well, we were just reading, or we were listening to a podcast, or we were watching one of the rural programs, or we just talked to somebody or other. I want to know more about regenerative agriculture, biological agriculture. I have big companies phone up. They said, we're looking for a expert for as a consultant, and we're going to be doing some vegetables down in Gippsland further. I said, no, that's fine, that's terrific. What's your method of agriculture? Is it conventional, or are you looking at biological? Oh, no, it'll be conventional. I said, sorry, you've got the wrong consultant. I'm not interested. So I won't work with anybody who is not prepared to think about the transition.
It sounds like what you're highlighting there is that simply substituting an input, substituting a chemical input, a synthetic input with a biological input is really not going to move us very far down the path of improved soil health.
That's not the way you go. When someone comes to me and they say, we want to change over, I say, okay, give me your worst paddock. That's all, just give me your worst paddock. Because if it all goes belly up, you haven't lost anything. You're not making anything off that piece of land anyway. So let's work on that one. And they say, okay. I say, now, no more synthetic chemistry. Aerate the soil. And we'll do this, and this, whatever that happens to be. And then I say, 12 months later, you come back to me and we'll have another look at your soil sample. And we'll have a look at what you visually are seeing. And then we'll decide whether you want to go forward. Often I come back, or I haven't heard from this, so I phone up and I say, what's happening with that paddock? Are we going to go on to another paddock? Oh, Mary, it works so well, we've done the whole farm. I go, where's my control gone? I haven't got a control anymore. I said, no, it was working. I worked in South Gippsland with this South Gippsland Land Care group, which are a very, very good group. We worked with 30 farmers, and we were looking at just aerating the soil with a yeoman's plough or something similar, putting in some multi-species, putting on some humate, and then I think the other one was just conventional. Some of the farmers found the response that they got by simply aerating the soil, nothing else, just aerating the soil and allowing the oxygen to go down, allowing the aerobic microbes to proliferate. They got as good a response just by putting a yeoman's plough through, no application, than they did with all the others. So if you show that to a farmer and say, okay, you've got all of your inputs onto your pasture, for example, and that's costing you whatever, and you're having to milk that number of cows or run that number of bullocks because you have to pay a bill, and yet you can stop all of that, aerate your soil, and get the same response. You can reduce your herd, whether it's cattle or dairy, and you can make more money because your input costs are basically nothing. And so this is what those sorts of pieces of research or just working with farmers, then they get together and they talk. It's like a ripple.
Do you have some favourite examples of success stories from farmers you've worked with, without necessarily naming names?
I can think of a couple over in some dairy farmers over in South Australia. I work with another fellow who makes the compost tea over there. But he goes out, gets the soil sample, takes a photograph of the really bad pasture.
And when you say bad pasture, what?
Weeds, reeds, it shows acidification, it shows compaction, there's waterlogging. When there's waterlogging, there's pugging because the cattle are making big holes and absolutely destroyed pasture. So we do a chemistry and a biology. I put together a recipe of compost tea with fish and kelp and molasses and maybe some rock dust and whatever. And then each 12 months at exactly the same time, so that we can reduce the variability of seasonality, there's another soil sample taken and another photograph taken. The change in the biology is just enormous, so we can reduce even our fish, kelp and molasses inputs. But the change in the pasture, you see the perennials coming through, you see the ground is draining beautifully, you see the signs of acidification have reduced. There's lots of examples like that. And then grain growers over in Western Australia, $3 million input bill we took, and reducing productivity, we got it down to $29,000 in under 2 years, and increasing productivity.
And what was done in that example?
Stopped all synthetic input, aerated, multi-species planted, and used fish, kelp and molasses. I have farmers up north of Murchison in Western Australia, less than 300 millimetre rainfall. What they're doing is they're getting old 30,000 or 25 to 30,000 litre winery vats, and they're making compost tea in it. So instead of burning or doing whatever they used to do up there, they now cut higher, crimp, put their compost tea on, and multi-species. They'll have a rotational crop already growing. And so they're using old winery vats to make compost tea. I mean, how good is that? There are so many examples like that.
Yeah. And I can't resist plugging a video that we've just released on brewing biofertiliser with a couple from near Swan Hill on our website, the Fitzpatricks. They're brewing, I think, 750,000 litres a year of biofertiliser. It's obviously a large-scale operation, but they scaled up slowly.
Yeah.
Can be done. And pretty simple ingredients, very easily available ingredients.
Well, the thing about a lot of the ingredients, depending on which area you're in, if you're near a milk factory, you've got whey and stuff that they just see as a waste. If you're near a brewery, there's the lees, there's all of that waste stream that's actually a resource. I mean, if you're near a timber mill, you go and get the sawdust and make it into compost and use. I mean, there is no such thing as an organic waste. It's a resource. It just has to be shown how it can be incorporated.
You've just shared a whole range of examples of where things have gone really well. Are there some general principles or rules of thumb that you take away from these experiences, things that tend to help farmers get a good outcome when they're trying to farm biologically, that are key themes through those success stories?
I think there's no silver bullet. So each farm is different, each environment is different, and I think it's a paradigm of caring for country that doesn't come from a spreadsheet from an accountant. It comes from your heart. And so if a farmer wants to make that change, then they have to really want it from their whole being. And if you've got that, then you say it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to happen overnight, but it can happen quickly. But there is a process that you can go through. And this is why I always say, let's start with your worst paddock. And then there's also, again, depending on climate and wherever. For example, when you put a multi-species crop in, we say, multi-species crops are fantastic. But in the first year, they actually aren't. You actually need a couple of years for them to kick in and then for those various species to acclimatise, establish themselves in their niche within there. Things will happen if you go through the process, but they're not going to happen necessarily immediately. And depending on your environment, if you're out in the west of New South Wales, things are not going to be as obviously rapid as they are, say, down here in Gippsland. Also, I would never tell a farmer what to do, ever, because they are intelligent people and they're always trying to do the right thing. And for someone to come along and say, you're not doing the right thing, that's not on. And so what I try to say to them is, come on a journey. It's a journey with me. And I will give you ideas of what I know have worked somewhere else. it's up to you now to take them on board and adapt them to your environment or to your particular farm and talk to me. I tried this, it didn't work. Okay, we'll tweak that and we'll do this. There's no silver bullet. It's a whole concept of trying things that are going to ultimately work best for the farmer on his or her particular little piece of dirt. And for every farmer it's different. But the basic idea is the same, but it's never going to be exactly the same recipe.
Yeah, we have the goal clear, but then the pathway to the goal might take some turns.
Many turns.
I find it interesting how often the question is asked, does that practice work? And it seems like that's not necessarily the right question to ask when we're dealing with a complex agroecological system. A better question might be, is this practice going to work in my context? We often talk in our team about how we do love sharing success stories, and we do share a lot of success stories, and there are a lot of great success stories out there, but I also know that can sometimes be a bit intimidating or disheartening for people who are just getting started and not necessarily seeing those immediate results. I wonder if you could share some examples of where things haven't necessarily gone well initially, or there haven't been immediate results, maybe even things have gone backwards for a time, and how the farmer in the situation managed that, or how you worked with them to manage through that situation.
I think probably one of the most recent ones is the multi-species. I can think of a couple of people have put in multi-species, and what they did was they took the different the plant groups and they bought a whole lot of seed, and as it turned out, those particular varieties of that seed were not right for their area. What you need to do is go to your local seed merchant, because he will have the seeds, or she will have the seeds that are suitable for your area. Now, that's one of the big errors that I found, was people just going and ordering seed online, particularly online, and then finding that it didn't grow. It didn't grow. Well, there's two reasons why it didn't grow. Either it was old seed, or it was seed that was not compatible for your area. The type was probably right, but the actual variety that you got was not right. And that's one of the major problems that we're finding, is the farmer not buying the seed from the seed merchant who has the varieties that suit that particular environment.
And what happened there? Did they try again?
Yeah, I said, don't change your varieties. I think one person put in 16 varieties and the other one put in, I don't know, it was closer to 20 or 20, over 20. I said, don't change your diversity. Go and take that list and go to your local seed merchant and get the varieties, and then use compost tea, aerate, put their seeds, compost tea, and don't be disappointed with the first year. But in the first year, if you're at all able, let all the multi-species go through to flowering and seeding, so that you set your own seed bank, because perennials is what you want. And those perennials then will come through in the second year, and they'll be absolutely what your particular environment is wanting. So that's probably one of the ones where I'm seeing most difficulty and most disappointment.
And I guess that maybe leads to a more general principle, don't experiment across the entire farm in year one. Expect that you may not get it right straight away. Yeah. Are there other common sort of errors to avoid?
Not aerating is one. Having compaction is a real problem, because a lot of although we need anaerobic microbes in the soil, we need mostly aerobes. And when you've got compaction, you lose your earthworms and you lose a lot of your fungal dynamics. And so if you go out onto your farm and you just stand there and do a 180-degree circle and say, okay, what would you like from me today? And if you get the feeling, well, I'm looking around and everything looks jolly good, well, enjoy the sunshine. But if you can see an area where you may have some bent grass, or you may have a bit of dying off or something, Use a penetrometer. Just get a piece of wire. You don't need to buy necessarily an expensive penetrometer, but just get a piece of really strong wire and push it into the soil and see how far you can get in. And if you're having problems getting in more than 100 millimeters, then there's probably an aeration problem there, a compaction problem. So you can just go around and stab the soil. Just by doing that, you can get an idea of what's going on. Okay, maybe I need to aerate. Aeration with a yeoman's plough or some sort of a drill is different from cultivation. Cultivation is totally destructive. I'm getting ready to do a talk next week, and I was having a look at the amount of topsoil, agricultural topsoil Australia is losing annually. And it was eye-watering. We are losing close to 500 mcgs fall to the roof of topsoil a year in Australia.
And for listeners who aren't familiar with the MCG, that's a 100,000 seat football
stadium in Melbourne. It is absolutely monstrous. This is billions of tons of topsoil, and that is from cultivated land. We cannot continue to cultivate land like that. We have to look back at what nature does, is 100% cover 100% of the time, and start to look at pasture cropping. It works.
What advice do you tend to give for people getting started with monitoring soil health? Because we've started doing work in this space and tend to find that sometimes people aren't sure what to take away from some of the results of soil monitoring, whether that be lab monitoring or in-paddock observations. So what advice do you give to people who are just getting started with that?
Well, I suppose the first thing is having your penetrometer, your piece of wire, and that will tell you your compaction. You then have a look when you've got an area where, you can just stand and look across your pastures and you can see where you might have some grass types that you don't want, and then go onto Google and say, well, I've got this in my paddock. What is it telling me? Well, it's telling you you've got acidity, or it's telling you you've got compaction. You can actually see those things. Now, in terms of if you wanted to go further and have a look at your microbiology, then there are very simple ways, and we teach them here. It's just making up a little dilute, say a gram of soil or a teaspoon of soil in a cup of water, putting it under the microscope and actually having a look at what's there. One of the things that we do in our microscope courses is to show a simple way looking at the soil or compost or whatever it happens to be under the microscope. And online, if you look at soil microbes, there's lots and lots of pictures. And we have a little booklet that we give, and we teach how to identify them. And we say, okay, if you see a lot of this particular organism, then you can say you've got low oxygen in your soil, so you're either waterlogged or you're compacted. If you can see a lot of these, good soil or good healthy soil. And so it's not rocket science, and you don't have to have a PhD to be able to look at organisms in the soil or compost or whatever, and actually get to understand some of the little groups. And so we encourage people to do that. It's very simple, but more it's the observation above the ground that will tell you what's happening below the ground. So if we do see a compacted area, I say take a bit some soil from there and keep that separate, and then come along somewhere where you see a nice diverse pasture. Take another lot of soil, then do the same dilution and compare the two, and you'll see there's a difference. So yes, visually above the ground, but if you're interested in using a microscope, very simply below the ground.
That reminds me of what you said earlier about the mindset with which people are coming to this. It sounds like coming to monitoring with a mindset of how can I learn more about the soil, rather than I have a very specific question that I need an answer to. That may not come immediately, but approaching monitoring as the beginning of a sort of ongoing journey of getting to know your soil and your pastures, your plants and everything better. Well, I wanted to talk a bit about research. Our knowledge of soil ecology has increased so much, but there's still so much that we don't know. And I think it can be pretty overwhelming and just feel a bit too complicated when people are having conversations about this incredibly complex ecosystem that is the soil. And I see sometimes that can lead people to say, oh, it's all just a bit hard and uncertain, and so I'll just keep doing what I've been doing. I don't feel confident in this whole sphere. As a scientist, as a researcher, and as a consultant to farmers, how do you navigate that?
I'm also a farmer, so that helps. If I'm talking as a researcher, I would say we take a specific topic within that whole complex. I mean, the microbial world is too complex. And I see molecular biologists saying, here we've got these organisms and you put that into a product and it's going to do such and such. I think what we have to understand is have a little bit of humility. I was just refereeing a paper recently, and the latest figure, and a lot of it will be based on molecular work, was there's something like 2.1 by 10 to the 24 microbes in soil.
That's different species.
Everything.
Yeah.
Now, I put it down as supreme arrogance in terms of humankind that they think they can even begin to understand that. So take some concept, take something like mycorrhizal. How can mycorrhizal improve, say, some of our food crops on different soil types? Something that's very specific, but don't come out of a university and then start sprouting about the fact that you know everything about soil. I've been working with soil for 45 years. I know nothing about soil. So I just get a little bit agitated when I see this arrogance of attitude. Instead of saying, I am here to learn a little bit. I'm here to do a little piece of research that is going to add to this complex, diverse environment that we've got.
And with an approach of curiosity, like the antidote to arrogance is curiosity.
Yeah.
And I also often think that in the face of that complexity, falling back on a rule of thumb that if we try to mimic what a natural system does, we're probably heading in the right direction of managing that complexity in a way that's going to be good for the fertility of the land, good for the function of the land.
Go back to basics. I made a comment in my pitch for the Rural Women's Award in that what we have to do is go back to the methods of our ancestors, but put it together with fundamental, very specific science. And then we're going to go forward.
And what are some of the things that you now feel quite confident about, but which are still not widely understood in the soil or the agricultural research community?
I think probably the most important one is this concept of 100% cover 100% of the time. Mother Nature doesn't have bare patches unless there's been a fire or there's been a volcano or something like that. We have to look at giving the soil biota the opportunity to do what it does best. And if we do that and then understand that every time we disturb the soil, and the only way we're going to feed ourselves other than foraging is to disturb the soil, the less we disturb the soil, then the more benefit the soil biota is going to give us to produce what we want to produce. This is why cultivation has to go. It just has to go. It's not sustainable. So we have to come back and minimize the impact that we have on the soil surface, which means we minimize the impact on what we have on the diverse of the microbes. Then we're going to get to a situation where we can feed 9 billion people into the future with climate change, because the microbes are there to do it. They're there to do it. They know what to do. They're just putting their hands up and saying, please let us do it. We can help you. And so minimal disturbance with as much science as possible around how we can then produce what we need to produce to feed the population, but still keep the microbes that have been there for 4 billion years or more doing what they're meant to do. If we go along with that thought in mind, then there is a future for humankind. Otherwise, there isn't.
Mary, you've just been awarded the Victorian Agri-Futures Rural Women's Award for your 40 plus years of work in biological farming and soil microbiology, which is an incredible achievement. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You've been dedicated to researching and promoting the importance of soil for more than 40 years. Why do you think this award is coming now at this moment?
Probably because I don't apply for awards. Somebody else applied for it. I don't do what I do to get awards. And I wouldn't have won this had someone else not put the application in. I'm not good at promoting myself. And so this late stage is because somebody very kindly put in an application. I'm very grateful for that person and for AgriFutures to recognise, because the other young people or the other women who are involved are brilliant. They're going to have a brilliant future. All these young women are doing the right thing, and AgriFutures has given women a place. Women have always been in agriculture, right through society. AgriFutures is giving them the opportunity to step forward and be shown. And so I'm grateful now to have been awarded this, even at this very late stage.
Yeah. Do you hope that it might signal that things are shifting a little towards recognising the fundamental role of biology in agriculture?
I would like to think so. Because we have to look at this style of caring for country into the future if we want a future. And it would be really nice to think that the governing bodies of the various agriculture would start to see that. They're generally not seeing it. What they're trying to do is to say, oh, we've got a disease. Okay, let's put a gene in so that we don't have that disease. Instead of saying, well, we've got the disease because we've got rat shit soil. Let's fix the soil. We won't have the disease. So I still see science as going the wrong way. There's a problem. Fix it because humanity has the ability to fix it. No, nature has the ability to fix it. We are stuffing it up. We're the problem, not the soil. So don't try and put a Band-Aid on the problem. Fix the problem. Go back and get all of that research money going into soil science and improving soil quality, and therefore we'll improve our plants and whatever, and we won't have the problems. So I still see too much money, as far as I'm concerned, wasted on putting a Band-Aid on a problem that is, we've just got a soil problem. That's all. Fix the soil.
Yeah. Well, Mary, good luck for the National Awards. That's coming up in September. Hopefully you can continue to drive this shift towards focusing on the soil and focusing on the underlying problems that are the root cause of some of these issues. And it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to talk with you.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it very much.
This episode was hosted by me, Ellie Court, and produced by Chris Wiffering. Head to the Soils for Life website to find out more about our work. And if you like what you hear, rate our podcast and leave a comment. Every review helps make it easier for others to find us on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. If you have feedback or suggestions of topics or people we should cover, please do get in touch at info@soilsforlife.org.au. Thanks for listening.